First item is correspondence. Do we have any tonight?
We do. We have a very nice thank you note from Marilyn Whitmire, and she is writing to the Haslett Board of Education. I want to thank you for the beautiful plaque. The reception that was put on for all of us was wonderful, and I thoroughly enjoyed my career of working as a paraprofessional in Haslett. That's good.
The next item would be comments from the public. Anyone that would like to make comments, this would be the time to do so. I also like to remind you that as this is our public budget hearing, we did have comments about the budget, this again is the time in which to make them. Okay, move on to superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Cody. I have two personnel recommendations this evening. One is Benjamin Data Lamente, and he's being recommended for our new video production teacher at the high school. And he comes to us from the Harper Creek Public Schools. And the second one is Catherine Whipple, and she's being recommended for hire as a math teacher at the high school, and she'll be replacing Sam Berg this next year. She comes to us from Florida. She's spent 5 years, the last 5 years as a teacher in Florida. So we welcome both of those folks. So both of those are action items for recommendation this evening. And that concludes our report.
We have a good number of discussion items tonight. The first one, which we added, so it's got a nice double A number by it, is first reading of the new board policy, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Yep, that's
That was throwing me off by the section numbers. You bet, no problem. Thank you very much. We have, section 5,000, the election of officers and length of term. This is a change to policy, based on the state legislation that was passed that, elections would be going to November of even years, and so we need to change, for our, election of officers for the, board, from July to January, and this is going to be the proposed revision language. Election of board officers shall occur at the first meeting of the board held in January. The term of the board officer's position shall be 1 year from the board's organizational meeting to the following board organizational meeting. In the event the board president is unable to chair the board's organizational meeting, the vice president shall sit in place of the president until a new president is elected. In the event of a ranking board officer is unable to chair the board's organizational meeting, the board shall elect a chairperson pro tem to chair the organizational meeting until a president is elected. So the only real change to that is from July to June.
Any questions?
I'd just like to make a comment. This is my soapbox, and I think that most people don't seem to be aware of this at all, that the legislature decided to change your school board elections so that you only have an election every other year. And in my opinion, as a Haslett community member, I think that that's very inappropriate. It means that you have less say in who's on your school board, and as in less, as in not as often can you make your opinions known. And I just don't think that that's good law.
Let's share that. Okay, next item is the 2011-12 final budget amendment. Steve on, or, okay, Mr. Booker,
He doesn't have to follow Michelle.
Usually we have
Yeah.
kids for him to follow.
First of all, I'd ask if we could switch around the agenda just real quickly to talk about the food service agreement. And the reason being is I have Mary Hassett here from Okemos, and so for her time, just to be aware of that, so that she doesn't have to do the budget presentation. We've talked about
It's
this.
an act of mercy.
We've talked about this issue over the last couple of months. As we all know, our current food service director is actually semi-retiring. We currently share our food service director with Stockbridge and Haslett. So because she's gonna go to halftime position, her interest is to basically continue to work at Stockbridge, and so that would be our position here at Haslett. We've looked at some options, and we've debated those back and forth. We've had discussions with the board. We asked Okemos to put a proposal for basically the same services that we're providing for Stockbridge for Haslett. worked very well. They also currently do both of the St. Mary's and St. Martha's, as well as, Springport schools in Jersey. So, we have the agreement here, and so basically, I want to just open it up for questions with regard to, the services performed. The cost is about what we're paying right now, as far as what we're currently paying our current food director. The contract costs about a wash. We still have to look at potentially, we may have to add a few hours, on our current staff to make up some of the other issues that we're dealing with as far as some of the office staff, but, we believe that it will be about a wash as far as cost. So, I'd kind of open it up to the board members if you had any questions specifically for myself. If you want to get a chance to put a face with Larry, so.
Well, I would just mention that we took a look at this in the Finance Facilities Committee and had a chance to kick it around a little bit and ask Steve some questions, and delighted to meet you. I think it is it's important to understand that we continue to look for ways to share services, and I think just another kind of creative approach that seems to be working pretty well. So.
I had the pleasure of meeting you at a Rotary event last year, but your reputation is very, very sound and positive among the various superintendents, so I look forward to this partnership.
I think what we've heard from Steve, one of the things that we've, the board has said continually as we look at these other collaborations is, it's very nice to save money, but importantly, it's the quality of service. And that's what we're delivering to our students, and that's what has to be, again, what Chris's reputation and your reputation, I think we're feeling very confident that really is
And as you know, and we'll talk about this in a minute, one of the new state requirements for best practices is to bid out one of your services, so we'll have a collaboration agreement. We currently have several out there, but this is a new agreement, this will help us satisfy the 7 of the 8 we'll talk about later tonight.
I don't really have a question. We also kicked it around in the Policy and Personnel Committee and had a chance to ask Steve all our questions. I just wanted to thank you for taking your evening to come here so that those of us that haven't had the chance to actually meet you and see you have that opportunity. Thank you for taking some of your evening time here.
You saved me from my work.
Oh, but you may have time to go back there and be there in time.
I often get home from ours and watch yours, so.
You need us to ask questions and draw this out a bit, don't you?
Welcome to him.
Do you have any food for thought?
Oh, that's bad. That's bad.
A small thought that I do have, since we're all neighbors, the 3 of us, I'm gonna do some training in August, and have an outside speaker come in and work with us in, changing the culture a little bit, because we'll be a transition from what's been happening probably somewhat, and then, also include links and openness employees there, so we can kind of collaborate together, because all the new federal regulations are just kind of, we're deer in headlights with that coming in the fall. So kind of work together and collaborate and share ideas back and forth. So, I do like to try to do that, bring us all together because we all do the same thing.
I focus so much on the sort of business end of this deal. I didn't. I don't think it occurred to me to ask the question about what do you see happening in nutrition that we ought to be paying attention to? I know a lot of focus has been given to, what's on the menu.
From what I read, what Catherine has on the webpage, your nutrition analysis came back really well. Ours usually do that also. I think probably by looking and checking that out, we're on our way right now to meet the new requirements. It's just gonna be tweaking, and the sodium's gonna be the thing that's gonna really, trick us, I guess, in the next 2 or 3 years to try to get that down. And hopefully work with the manufacturers that will happen on that. So we just have to stay on board and keep pushing those fresh
It's very complicated, it's very, it's gonna be logistically troubling to stay up with that.
I'm on first name basis with the health department.
Is that a good thing or?
That is a good thing, because we have a really good working relationship. And so I call them and say, what if, could we, and they work through it. And the health department, that never did group the other day, I was on the phone with them Friday, for probably half an hour, talking about those things coming up. And they really don't wanna be the bad guy and all of that, but they want us to kind of, go to them and say, what are we doing right, what do we need to change? And I don't think they're gonna come down with a, really heavy hand here in the near future, because they're really overwhelmed with a lot of other things they're dealing with. So schools, we all do a very nice job, in sanitation and safety and licensing, but they're looking beyond kitchens, to athletics and outside groups coming in. So we're gonna, walk softly with that and get their guidance, and, usually if there's an outside group coming in, I'm on the phone with them, are we okay, aren't we okay, what do we need to do, and so forth, because we don't need any issues out there.
Where do you stand on pink slime?
We don't have pink
Oh,
slime.
pink slime, all right, good.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks. Nice to meet all of you.
Okay, now we get to the. So really,
Whole
these are
thing.
the three things, or actually two things with some questions and answers at the end. First of all, we're gonna talk about the 11-12 budget, our final budget amendment on the current budget year that we're in right now. And then we're also gonna talk about the 12-13 proposed budget. And the good news, bad news is, the good news is we actually know what our numbers are gonna be for next year, as we did last year. The bad news is unfortunately, they're not gonna be as positive as we hope, but we'll go through those in just a few minutes. As far as this year, this first column here, this is where we expect that we're gonna be for this year, about a $210,000 deficit, about a $2.3 million beginning fund balance, and that brings us down to about $2.1 million. As you all know, I've been talking about this the last year, is the bus issue, is the reason that we have an issue in the first place is 2 years ago, we budgeted for buses, and we were not able to put them in the budget because they didn't arrive until after the year end. So we carried over fund balance from 10-11 into 11-12, and realizing that we were gonna spend $180,000 of our fund balance for buses. So we're projecting just a little more than that, but essentially we're gonna end at about $2.1 million for the end of this year. Just very quickly, some of the amendment, the adjustments on the revenue side, just some minor things on the state adjustments, a little more money in facility rentals, this property taxes, and I'll talk about this in next year's budget, is that whatever we lose in property taxes, because values go down locally, we get made up from the state. So really, this is just kind of the last adjustment that we're getting for property taxes. We got a little edge jobs money through the federal government at the year end. We found out that we were gonna get a little money, that $43,000. And then the special education allocation, every quarter we get an adjustment. We get money through the county, through a countywide millage, and we use that to pay for special ed services. And so they adjust that with the revenue and expenditures, and you'll see in just a minute, there's an offset expenditures to that revenue, actually more than the amount we're gonna get in, but about $145,000 in adjustments to our current revenue base. And then the expenditure side, first issue is this early college tuition. Originally, when we got involved in this program at LCC, I had only budgeted the slots that we got allocated, and thankfully, they had more slots available, so they opened that up. And we were able to add about 5 or 6 new students into that program. So we had to pay the tuition for that, which is basically our foundation allowance that we pay the LCC for that. And then the special education services, that's the additional cost that we have to pay the ISD for, not only our itinerant staff, the PTs, OTs, all those special ed staff that we contract with the ISD, and then all the tuition costs that we pay for other kids that go to different programs, not only other districts, but mainly at Hartwood, which is the self-contained program out in Mason. And so, in total, about $176,000 in total expense adjustments. So as I mentioned before, it brings our fund balance down to about $2.1 million. If you look at taking that $180,000 out of here, over the last 3 years, we've been pretty flat. as far as total fund balance, a little increase if you look from 1.92 million, but all in all, about 8% of our fund balance, and the reason that we use a percentage is because as you compare yourself to other districts, you like to look at what is your percentage of total expenditures. And as you'll see here in just a minute, this is where we compare, and this is at the end of last year, because we don't have numbers for all the districts for the end of this year, but, we ended last year at 8.8, that's gonna go down slightly. But you can see, we're on the lower end as far as fund balance. We've never been a district that's had a huge fund balance. Although these numbers are a little deceiving because we don't know how much all these districts are gonna potentially use their fund balance this year. The good news is we've been pretty faithful at not using fund balance to balance our budget in the prior year. So, as you can see, the countywide average about 11%, we're just a little below that, but I still think we're in good shape.
Can you remind folks about one of the reasons we need that is because of when we're getting our payments? from the
Correct,
state?
people ask, why do you need fund balance? Well, as you have a regular savings account, as an individual, you like to have some money set aside. So the main reason that we have fund balance is that the way that the state pays us, we don't get our first payment until October 1st. Our fiscal year starts July 1st, so we go several months before we even get any of our money. And they don't pay us on last year until July and August, the last two payments in July and August. So not only do we not get our new revenue until the year already starts, we don't get last year's revenue until after the year ends. So we have to borrow anywhere between $1 million and $1.5 million every year just to get through the year until we start getting our money from the state. We do collect property taxes in the summer, but we don't get our first state aid payment until October. So that's one of the main reasons that we have fund balance. So let's talk about House Bill 5372. This is the actual bill, school aid bill for this year. There are 4 pots of money out there with regard to next year, and I'll talk about each one of those individually. One of the things that they added at the very end is up to $120 per pupil increase for the districts that were at the very bottom of the foundation allowance. And when I say foundation allowance, for those of you who are not familiar with that, that's the amount we get per student, for every student that we have in our district. And the lowest amount that districts received was $68.46. So what they said is any district from this amount up to $69.66 would get up to $120. Now they prorated it. If you were on the high end, you didn't get the full 120, but all the districts on the low end got $120 per student. Unfortunately, we were $31 from being in that threshold amount, so we essentially got nothing. But now what that does is basically push all those districts up, so now we're pretty much at the bottom. We were close to the bottom last year, and now we're a lot closer to the bottom because they're bringing those other districts up. So we got none of that money. Retirement rate, we've talked about this at length. The retirement rate is the amount we have to pay into the public school retirement system. This rate is scheduled to go up almost 3%, at an increased cost to us of about $388,000 or $143 per pupil. There is the Senate Bill 1040, which was also talked about there, that if this goes through, the idea is that they believe that they're going to freeze the rate for next year, which would mean that we wouldn't have this additional cost of $388,000. That's not been in law right now, so I have it in the budget for next year. If that changes, then we'll adjust that as we make our amendments to the budget. Retirement offset, this was additional amount of money that we got last year to help of these increased retirement rate increases. And so we're basically gonna get the same that we got last year, $102 for a 0 student increase for next year. Then we had this best practice that I alluded to when we talked about the food service. Last year we had a best practice incentive of $100 per student if we met 4 out of the 5 requirements by the state. These are things that the state says that you have to do and you have to attest that you're doing. One of them was bidding out non-essential, non-teacher services. You had to be the provider of your own health insurance. You had to provide a bunch of different things. And now what they've done is they changed 5 out of 6 to 7 out of 8. They added a few more categories. So now you gotta meet 7 of those 8. Unfortunately, they reduced the amount from $100 to $52 a month. So we're essentially losing $48 per student because of the best practice piece. Then lastly was the performance incentive piece. This is the big push to start rewarding districts for performance. Unfortunately, the performance is based on growth. It's not necessarily meaning where you are achieving. And so we've not really seen how they've calculated this. As we mentioned before, there's 3 components, 2 components that meet up to $100 per student. Actually, that should say 100, it says 20. There was 60 for elementary, math, and reading, and then there was another $40 for meat. And unfortunately, early indications that we're not going to get any money for the performance incentive. The only two districts in Union County that got it were Leslie and Stockbridge. And no disrespect to those districts, but they generally are the two districts that you think of high achieving districts when you talk about it. So, but it's all about growth. It's how you progress from last year to this year. And so when we see those results, we'll be able to look at exactly how those numbers are calculated. But unfortunately, they've not given us numbers. They just told us what we're gonna get. So that's the last piece. So you put all those numbers together, a possible reduction of $191 per student, or a little over $500,000 that we're gonna lose because of the budget for next year. Enrollment, this is another big piece. As you look at foundation allowance, the equation is such as foundation allowance times number of students. As we look at our enrollment projections for next year, we're assuming flat enrollment. And we actually met this morning with all of our administrators and looked at our school choice numbers and all of our numbers, and it pretty much looks like we're gonna have flat enrollment. We may have a few students less. It just all depends. The problem is that all of our classes are pretty full. And Mr. Jenkins here, he can attest at ninth grade, as we normally would take a lot of ninth graders because you get kids that come from the Catholic schools and that will come into ninth grade, that we just don't have room for them unless we add sections. And then you get into adding cost and what's better, adding sections or opening that up. And so we're really not able to fill many slots other than where we have those little gaps in certain grades where we can fill a few students here and there. So in the past, we've seen some increases due to school choice, but all of our class sizes are pretty maxed right now as we've tried to make those cuts over the last couple of years. So there really isn't any room to squeeze in too many school choice. And we try to honor students that are already in our district. We have siblings that come into the district. We try to honor those folks, but we really don't have a whole lot of room, unfortunately. We may end up turning down a few students this year.
Steve, what's the waiting list look like?
Well, we have minimum requirements that we set out. As a part of that, we have to say how many will accept at each grade level. We can always accept more than that, so we set those numbers pretty low because we don't really know. We want to be able to take at least a couple because, like I say, we try to take those siblings. Kindergarten's the biggest number. We usually advertise 35, and I think as of this morning we have 56. So not all of those will come, so we have to factor in some of those we'll put in at multiple districts and then decide where they want to go. The good, positive, and negative is that with all the kindergarten, we'll probably see a better number than we've had because we've had quite a few students that have gone to other districts because they wanted all the kindergarten and come back in first grade after kindergarten. So enrollment numbers are pretty flat. These are the assumptions that we put into the budget. As I mentioned, a 0% increase or decrease on per pupil, flat enrollment, no step increases, and that's the amount that are in generally the teacher contracts where teachers will move along the step increases. With the new law at the state level, we don't have to pay those unless we negotiate them. It used to be that they were just automatic. And so we've started with no step increases. The retirement rate, as we talked about, health insurance, actually our MESA rates for the first time in, I don't even remember, went down this year, 4.9%. So we factored that in there. And then we were gonna qualify for $154 of total amount of those additional incentives. And as I mentioned before, this is actually not added onto the foundation allowance. So every year, they're gonna have these additional items that aren't part of foundation allowance. So as you look at last year, that's one of the reasons that we're seeing a reduction. If we got 200 last year, 202, we'll only get 154 because they're not guaranteed every year. You have to meet those requirements every year as part of the new state requirements. And so the additional deficit, which we'll talk about in numbers in a minute, is basically gotta made up through either restructuring contracts or making additional cuts. And we're currently in negotiations right now, and so we're trying to work with employee groups. As we have in the past, they've been very good at trying to meet some of those challenges that we've had. So if you put the numbers together, we're essentially having revenues and expenditures equal, still staying with that $2.1 million at the end of the year, at the end of next year. Here's how the numbers on the revenues. We're actually getting a little more in state aid due to the fact that our spring count is higher this year than it was last year. If you assume flat enrollment, they blend the counts from spring to fall. Because spring is higher this year, we're getting a little bump because we have higher numbers in the spring. And then property taxes, this is because of the decrease in property values. We lose it locally, but we get it made up at the state level. And then that $48 per student that we're losing over last year, about $103,000. Ed Jobs and Money, as we talked about that was a one-time deal. EPA grant for buses, as you'll see in just a minute, we're basically taking the $180,000 out of our budget that we had for buses this year, except we got a grant to pay for that. And so the total cost of the bus was $235,000, and we got $55,000 from the EPA to help offset that. So the revenue expense are both taken off, and you'll see that other portion in a minute. Then that special ed allocation from the ISD, that ISD millage amount that we get about 6% of the total pot. Because property taxes are going down countywide about 6.5%, we lose additional dollars because, you know, they can only raise so much based on the millage rate that they have locally. So that's what they're potentially gonna lose in special ed dollars. On the expense side, as we've all talked about all-day kindergarten at length over the last several months, this is really the biggest piece of this 5.7 FTEs that we have to add in teaching staff, and mainly that's at kindergarten, because we have to add basically 5 sections of kindergarten. We have 5 half-day sections in DK. We have 5 sections right now, we gotta add 5 to make up those additional sections. The other piece here, basically we got grade changes. We have a small class going to where there was 4 sections. This is basically Raleigh Murphy. We had 3 sections in 2nd grade. Now that class moves to 3rd grade, and so now you gotta reduce a teacher there and potentially add a teacher at the lower grade. So we had a big kindergarten class, we had to add that as that went from kindergarten to 1st grade, and we had a smaller 1st grade that we had to reduce when 1st grade goes to 2nd grade. So, and then the only other really major thing, middle school, we added teaming back at 6th grade. We felt that was programmatically something that we needed to do. These are the net of all the different changes to each of the buildings. But overall, about 5.7 FTEs. As far as the cost per teacher, those are based on the ones we know. We've already hired, as we mentioned today, we hired a couple teachers. The other ones, we assume they're coming in at BA1, and we don't know what their insurance is gonna be, but we make some assumptions there too. That retirement increase, $388,000, the medical insurance reduction, $94,000. Other staffing adjustments, this is basically all of, the changes due to retirements, and refilling of positions. We fortunately actually have several positions open. I think Sharon talked 8 or 9 positions.
9 teaching.
Nine total positions. So somebody goes out and you hire someone in, and generally you're hiring at less cost than they go out. So that's really, we had 4 or 5 secretaries retired last year, same thing. You know, they go out at a higher rate and they get hired in at a lower rate. So those are the net effect of all those changes. Severance packages, we only had 1 teacher. Actually, we had 2 teachers, but only 1 that qualified for it. We had 5 or 6 last year, so that's the difference between what we have to pay when someone retires. Bus purchases I talked about. Utilities, as you know, we're in the 2nd phase of our energy management program where we're revamping all of our gyms. So there's some savings there, in addition to renegotiating our natural gas contract, that we save some money there. Athletic director, we had Jamie Gent on contract for a little while in transition. That is no longer, he is now done completely. And then, as I mentioned, this is that kind of plug figure, $700,000 for contract restructuring for the cuts that we have to make. Now, we're pretty sure that $388,000 is gonna go away because they're gonna freeze the rate of Senate Bill 1040. So basically, it turns our deficit into $325,000, which is still a decent sized number, but it's a lot less than we potentially could have dealt with. And so, as you know, we've been making cuts over the last several years, and we're at the point where, you know, we really can't make any more staffing cuts without significantly affecting the program, not only in custodial, but busing and secretarial, all of those areas, including teaching. So, all in all, about $565,000 in reductions. If in
Steve,
fact,
can I interrupt you for
Sure.
1 second? You said that we were adding teaming back at the middle school, and that's not quite accurate. We are adding teaming to the 6th grade level.
6th grade level, I'm sorry, you're correct, just the 6th grade. And we feel that because of the transition is big going from elementary to middle school, we got rid of that, and we really saw some of the effect of that, and so our middle school staff suggested doing that, and so we put that as a priority in our budget. So if in fact, we have a balanced budget for next year, we're gonna stay at 2.1 million. Now, if we can't get all the additional reductions through contract negotiations or additional cuts, then that number might go down. Hopefully we won't get to that point, but still, you know, all in all, 8%, not a great amount, but I think we're in a safe area as far as where we are fund balance. Obviously, I wouldn't want to go too much deeper into that number. Okemos has basically got down to 3%. They've balanced their budget over the last several years by using fund balance. At some point, you know, you can't do that forever, because as I mentioned, is that if you have a deficit this year, it carries over into next year. So if you use your fund balance this year, you start out next year with the same deficit that you had because you didn't address it. So you're just pushing it down the road. At some point, you have to address it. So thankfully, we've been relatively fiscally responsible to do that. So next step, as I mentioned, continue to work with employees groups to reduce costs. We always have, as we call it, page 2, which are kind kind of the more difficult cuts if we have to go a little deeper. Enrollment, we talked about that, we actually are pretty safe with that flat enrollment. Additional bills, really the only one at this point is Senate Bill 1040, which is that retirement issue. It's pretty much the whole school aid bill has been passed. And then as soon as we find out these numbers, we'll obviously get these out to the board, and we could have some changes over the summer depending upon some program changes and things like that. Next year, we have our annual retreat with administrators. Next year, we're gonna be talking about goals and some other things as we try to prepare for next week. So, that basically in a nutshell is the budget. I'd be more than happy to entertain any questions. I know most of you have gone over this many, many times, but I just wanna make sure that I still have the opportunity to clarify issues or ask any question or answer the question.
Steve, would you go back to your assumptions? Would you just go back to that slide for a second? So these are the kind of moving pieces right now.
Well, all of them are known, except for the retirement rate.
Yeah.
And we're pretty sure that that's known, that that's either gonna freeze or it's gonna go up. That amount there.
But the zero per pupil decrease, is that right?
Well, it's zero, you could say just zero. There's no increase or decrease, it's just
It's
zero
us
amount.
not getting one to one, that's what that.
That's what that means. That should probably be a little clearer. So
Depends
these,
on whether your
like I
cup's
said,
half
these are
empty or full.
everything that's in the state bill. You know, some of those things, well, like step increases, you know, we've frozen those. And we're still in negotiations right now, that potentially could change, but, this is everything we know. And normally, as you know, it's September or October before we actually know, so we're making assumptions based on real estimates, whereas at least, as I mentioned, the good news, bad news is,
Right.
the good news is we know,
We
and
know.
the bad news is not where we wanted it to be, so.
Maybe what I was really getting at is the second to last point. So that's really where so no foundation allowance increase. But the incentives that put into the budget bill produce what we would expect to be $154 per
Last year,
student,
we got 202.
and last year it was 202.
And then you take into consideration the retirement rate, and that adds potentially, in addition to the 48, isn't it? You know, if you look at it here, really, this kind of breaks down those buckets, and you go from 48 to 191.
So the fourth point down is best practices incentives. The total any district could get is $52.
Correct.
And you do that by hitting 7 of 8. We will hit 7 of 8,
We're
most likely.
most likely, yeah. We're still, there's a few of them that aren't really well defined, like there's this health initiative, health education, physical education, and it doesn't really specify what we have to do.
Right.
So.
That was just thrown in.
that
Yes.
was-
That was just thrown in as a good way to describe it. Just quickly put in there, okay.
So
That
we're
was-
not really certain. So,
No.
like I said, the frustrating part is that, you know, the perception, I think, from the public or most of them, that, you know, when you read in the papers that, you know, schools are getting more money, you know, they're getting money. Well, the reality is that we're actually getting less money than we got last year. And
Reality
the way
is
I
that-
do accounting, that's actually a cut, so,
Well, even the people that got money aren't gonna get enough to offset the cost of all the kindergarten.
no, and that's our biggest.
So, I mean, there, you know, no matter how you work it, everybody's getting cut. It's just a matter of how much you get cut.
Except for those who are already doing all-day kindergarten.
But even the ones that were doing all-day kindergarten were pretty much only doing like 1 or 2 classes. I mean, they weren't doing all of their whole, district. So, I mean, no matter how you work it, it's cut.
That's really what I found most frustrating, is what you know, general opinion is, what you read in the press is schools of Health Marvelous are getting more money, and we're rewarding the ones that are doing good, and doing well, and, you know, we're steering it towards policies that are going to make more efficiently run, better producing school districts, and, you know, that's not the case, that, at least not the way.
Didn't work out that
It
way.
didn't work out
Yeah.
that way, because we're not a district that is not performing, we're not a district that is irresponsible, we're not a district that just, that uses one-time money to pay for ongoing programs and all, but, you know, and they chose us as a loser.
It was predicated on an incremental change. And when you're already performing at a very high level, the degree of incremental change isn't adequately rewarded. So it's kind of Spalding principle. You get nothing like it.
And you're making a flip on the higher performings are going to start going down as your lower performers are going up.
Well, I mean, it's always been a
Which is a
problem.
dangerous
It still is a problem that there are districts that get paid, that have a much lower foundation. I mean, we like to, compare ourselves favorably to our two neighboring districts, and they get over $1,000 more a student than we do.
And they still can't manage it.
And the interesting,
Whatever, but, it's so, I mean, that's wrong. It's wrong that there are districts that are way up here and districts that are way down here, but it's wrong to also not.
well, Mr. Pridgeon today was talking to me about the middle school, and looking at achievement scores. He's talking to his teachers, basically saying that we're now lining up against the Bloomfield Hills, the Birminghams, as far as where we are. But
Yeah.
in Birmingham, Bloomfield
Oh, they're
Hills, they
like
get
double.
about $4,800 more
Yeah.
per student, about $12 million a year more, and we're achieving it close to the same or right around the same level. So, I think that's obviously a test to our district and our employees and our teachers. So, we're still able to achieve with less.
I find this really troubling about where we're going from here. I mean, I know that last year we had it was the first time we really saw money in different buckets that wasn't added to the foundation, the best practices. And again, this district has always embraced the best practices that come along. Heck, you guys create half of them, with what we do. So we're not afraid or uncomfortable to move forward. So we move forward and it doesn't matter. And just.
What does matter is the students' benefit from our needs. We might
Yes,
not get financially
as long as we're
rewarded.
able to keep doing and working with the principals that we have been able to do so, which is just getting more and more difficult this year.
See, I get more general than that about the whole subject. There was a surplus in money that was promised to schools, and there was a big surplus. And yet we are all looking again at cuts, because the legislature decided to throw community colleges in there and get it paid for that way so that they didn't have to take it out of their money. And that's what's frustrating to me as a taxpayer, because we voted for something that was supposed to fund our schools. And we were thinking that, as the state did with that money allotted to schools, that the schools would tighten their belt when they have to and expand when they get the money. Well, the money's there, but we're not getting the money. And that's what's frustrating to me.
I have an even slightly different take. I've got a fairly decent seat for watching what the legislature's doing, as does Kristen. And I kind of liked where they were going, which is to encourage certain behaviors, most of which we participate in, most of which we're early adopters, if not, innovators in. And my shock is that when the dust settled on the new formula, that we weren't a winner. Really, considering where the messaging and what I thought was happening, and that new dollars are going into K-12 education, you're right, but even then there was still new dollars put to it through incentives. And when all of that settled, the Hazlet Public School System didn't win, didn't gain. As you said, Chris, we are, we're tops in the county in scores. We continue to make great progress. We do RTI. We're leading the way in
And we do it with eyes wide open and being a good team player and embracing that. And you're right, after a while, we're teaching our kids that all the time, but after a while, where do you say, wait a second? And I think that's the thing that we, that you want to get through the administration and people so that they completely understand, because we're not comparing apples to apples here ever. It's just a different case of scenarios all the time, but I think we pride ourselves on doing the right thing and getting our kids to do the right thing, and so after a while, you just have to hope at some point that there is going to be some very concrete and reward for us somewhere, somehow. I don't think we stopped doing the right thing, but it surely is frustrating to
Yep.
a certain degree, because you're trying to be a really good team player and embrace that. For the most part, it's good stuff, but it's just, we don't win, is what you're saying, and it's absolutely correct.
Well, I think what Tobias made a good point, though. We do win because we're producing students that are as ready as we can make them for the you know, I still think I think it's still a bigger picture about the way we fund schools in our state, and I'm concerned about the direction we're going in, that this is the way we've decided to do it. And it's going to start affecting everybody, and, you know, I think the legislature, given where they had to work with, that they were going to have to take more out of that fund than had originally been planned when the fund was set up. I understand why they chose the lower paid schools. I mean, honestly, let's face it, they probably needed the money more than we did. I still think it's wrong the way we went with this, but I still think the fundamental problem was the basic decision to change what that money was supposed to go for at the legislative level. And there's nothing we can do about that except to continue to try to do the best practices and still produce the best students we can.
I will tell you the one real positive thing, the legislators really tried to attack the retirement industry, the whole system. You know, $46 billion unfunded.
I'd feel better if I didn't think that was
You know, at
huge.
least I think they are trying to address that issue, because it's not gonna go away unless they do, they can get some real progress in addressing that issue, as other state governments are in the same issues with these huge underfunded liabilities for these pension funds. So, I do agree with the public state.
Right, they've been trying to do that. Other than really bothers me too, is that this is called a performance grant. So there's a list that says, we're giving performance grant, and that's what goes into it. You know, that, I mean, if you call this a grant for, you know, even.
An underperformance grant
Whatever, I mean, because that's what it is. It's a grant for those.
for improvement. Yeah.
It's, yeah, right, or call it improvement grant, performance grant. I mean, that's not good, that's not good to call it that and not put our name on that list. No, because we had the performance, well, except we have no idea. You guys don't even know how they come up with that. How they come up with that. That's crazy too.
We won't find out later.
You know, though, one positive that I look at, and I think we really have to give a lot of credit to the way our school operates, the way they have that vision into the future with all the collaborations that we're doing. You know, I just look at this in the utilities, $75,000 less. That if we had not made that change when we did, we would not be looking at a reduction of that amount of money. 75,000 in the whole scheme is not a lot, but it all adds up.
Yeah, and how many years ago did we start on that? Because we were one of the first to do it. I mean, to
And we
see
came
that
back
that was gonna
in
be,
36 months
Yeah.
instead of 60.
right, so
It's
we,
great.
yep.
And you think, well,
Yeah, we didn't have to pay it back because it was sinking fund in the first place. Yep.
So, when we have this on next meeting's agenda, it's basically going to look like, the last couple of pages, that 712
It'll be in the
number
budget at this point.
will be like this unless by then we send out some ordinance or someone.
Yeah, and, you know, not knowing, unfortunately, Vanessa didn't know all the details, so I would recommend we just keep it at that. And we can always amend the budget at any point after the beginning of the year, so that was more just to be,
So can the legislature,
yeah, true.
and they've done that more than once, took the money back that they gave us to begin with. This year they didn't give us any money, so maybe we won't have to look at that, but.
that's,
That was fun.
I think, the fund equity issue, I think you really.
we don't work that. Do you have that in capital letters?
And by the way, as public record,
That
that
wasn't your
Lansing
article.
State Journal article was completely erroneous. It was based on faulty assumptions. We called them, we explained to them, and yet it didn't change a thing.
Did you see the correction? Did you miss
A little
Did you miss the correction?
Are you serious?
No, I am serious. Yeah.
Well, that's very good. I'm glad you
Yes,
responded.
Elias, because I took care of
Yeah. She did. That's true.
That's why we
Yeah.
are so glad that you're here.
All right.
We know somebody in the media, that helps.
Dawn, did the LSJ do it or just?
I did.
No, but did they do it in the LSJ? Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it was in the Courier, not in
Yeah.
the Journal.
It's a superior publication.
Yeah, if you want some accurate information,
She knows
we
where.
know who to
Just
talk
go
to.
to Dawn.
Knows who to ask anyway.
All right, food service, so now we go to board reports. The first one, I talked to most of you about this, but, we have a few challenges with our summer schedule this summer, and I'm sure some of them are mind doing. And I passed around a calendar and asked everyone to just write down what dates they were at in town. I believe we may need to either add a July meeting or change our July 9th meeting. And so, what I'd like to do, I'll know more in the next couple of weeks what they need to do there, and we'll let you guys know if we're making that change. And I think Robbie might be the only one that didn't see this yet, so I'll pass it down your way. And also on that note, both Don and I are going to be absent at the next meeting, the June 25th meeting, which we did not warn you. But, Kristen will share that meeting for us in our absence, and then, so that's, I don't see it looks like a problem now, but we need to make sure we go to that meeting.
I'm here.
I'll be there.
I'll be there.
You are helping us out, so.
I thought you were.
This was supposed to be last.
All right, policy personnel, please.
Sure, thank you very much, Chris. Several of these, items we have already discussed this evening, including the 2012-2013 budget. Steve once again did a championship job on, explaining the budget for us, and so we appreciate the hard work there. We also discussed handbooks in, the Policy and Personnel Committee, meeting. The committee discussed additions to the handbooks of the middle school and high school. The additions to the handbooks are surveillance cameras, drug detention policy, and academic integrity. We also discussed board policy recommendations. As you know, we've already read 5,000 this evening. We also have several board policy recommendations in policy 5500, which is professional staff probation and tenure evaluation. The committee discussed proposals for two new policy, board 5510, staff reduction recalls, board policy 5512. Board policy recommendations, matters relating to staff evaluations, probation and tenure, assignment, transfer, and reduction recall used to be subjects of collective bargaining. This meant that the language in our employee contract, group contract set the policy for these issues. New law enacted last year removes these items as subjects of collective bargaining and therefore establishes the need for board policies governing those issues. In some cases, it will be revisions to current policies, in other cases, it will be establishing completely new policies. The committee discussed drafts of these policies and expects to be in a position to bring them to the full board for first reading in the near future, so more work to be done on those. The collaboration agreements, we did talk about food service as well, I had an opportunity to talk about that this evening. And then also, we discussed our Williamston Community Schools collaboration agreements for our financial management services and technology services. And that is an agreement with Steve Cook and Jeff Casson, working with Williamston Public Schools as well. And that's it. Thank you, Chris.
Finance facilities committee.
We met last Thursday, and because we weren't sure that the other committee was doing its work, we looked at the handbook and looked it over pretty carefully. No. We did take a quick look, but we dug a little deeper into those collaboration agreements, both the Williamston, the two Williamston agreements. If everybody doesn't know, we share a finance manager with Williamston. We share a technology manager with Williamston, both of which have happened in the last year and a half. 2 years. And from our perspective, are going well, and I think from Williamston's perspective, are going well. So we were talking about renewal of those agreements, and I think our recommendation will be to do so. We looked at the final budget amendment that we kind of talked about very quickly this evening, but it comes to a point where it's the wrap-up of the current budget as we put this current year to bed. So, I mean, that again, we talked about it a little bit this evening, that'll be on the agenda next time. And then we talked about the 12-13 budget. Much of the bloodletting that you heard about tonight started in committee last Thursday, and Steve heard most of our complaining, then, but it gave us a chance to really see it early, so that's what we did at the Finance Committee.
Yes, we have, in the last couple of months, put together a committee, I'm not exactly certain, do they have a name? Just ad hoc committee, sounds good. Ad hoc committee to discuss, opportunities to, reward and incentivize our administrators and superintendent. And we felt very strongly that, we needed to take a look at, obviously the outstanding performance and continued progress that we were making, or that actually our students were making with Hazlet Public Schools. And so we chatted a little bit about what that could look like, took a look at our finances, in light of last week's, information coming from the state. Obviously, we will not be receiving the same dollar amount of state support, that we had in previous years with a projected deficit of around $500,000. We've talked a little bit in that committee to make sure that our priority continues to be on balancing the budget, putting money into educational programs to support our students and move Hazlet Public Schools in a positive direction. So as much as we'd like to do something, we think that our administrators and staff are very deserving of having some type of reward and being incentivized. We obviously want to continue moving Hazlet Public Schools in a positive direction. That's what that A+ is for, and we're striving toward all the time. We felt at this time that it was something that we needed to just wait on and watch and observe what was going to happen financially. So we'll be discussing that in coming months. We also know that there's some cleanup work to do in the contracts. There's some things that have changed in the last couple of years with the state, and so we'll be taking a look at making some contract language too in the next couple of months. But we want to make sure that the board is aware of what we're doing.
Items for board members.
I just wanted to say how nice the employee retirement reception was. Nice job, Cheryl. But it was very beautiful, and it was nice to see a lot of our retirees come back for it. And had a pretty good crowd, and really send off the people that were retiring this year. And good stead, so it was very nice.
I guess I just didn't want this to go sort of unnoticed, that there's a group of you here tonight that are interested in, I think, representing the band boosters and particularly representing the interest of the band. I just wanted to say, we hear you. Even though you haven't said anything, the message is clear. And I just wanted to acknowledge that you're here, and we know why.
Action items, we have a long list. We have 12 of them tonight. Does anyone?
I would ask that item 9 be pulled, which is the Financial Management Service Collaboration Agreement with Williamson Community Schools.
And that is H.
That is Exhibit H, yes.
And that is it.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody want to make a motion regarding the remaining action items?
I move approval of the remaining action items.
Support.
The first one is the approval of the minutes of the May 14, 2012 regular board meeting. Item 2 is approval of the minutes of the June 8, 2012 policy and personnel meeting. Item 3 is approval of the minutes of June 7, 2012 finance facilities committee meeting. Item 4 is approval of the minutes of the May 16, 2012 board committee meeting. Item 5 is the computer replacement purchase. Item
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Items 1 through 8 and 10 through 12 pass.
Sure. Thank you. The only reason I asked item 9 to be pulled was a technical matter. I support the resolution itself, but there are a couple blanks left in the resolution that we were approving. And the only reason I asked for it to be pulled was so that we could address the fact that there were blanks in there. There are 2 blanks in it, at the beginning when, at the first paragraph, when when the agreement is actually made and entered into, and then the second blank is at 2.1, which is the date that it commences, the effective date. The term of the agreement is noted in our agenda as being July 1 of this year, 2012, June 30 of 2013. So we know the date to be put in 2.1 as the effective date should be July 1 of 2012. The other effective, the date that's made on at the beginning is a little bit harder to be determined just because of when it's signed by Williamston. I understand they may have already signed it. I don't know if on the one they signed they already filled in a date or not. So I would move that we approve the proposed agreement in the form of Exhibit H with 2.1 filled in to be July 1, and with the, I'm sorry, there's also a blank for the effective date on attachment A. So the date on the attachment A for when it's entered into, and the first paragraph, I would include in my motion that the superintendent be authorized to fill in those dates.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving item H as subjected by the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item H, or item 9, H, passes. Okay. Is the next regularly scheduled board meeting will be held in the Board of Consider President Administration Building at 7 p.m. on June 25th. And that we may be changing the July date, and we'll post that in chat.
I will move for adjournment.
Support. All right, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, we're adjourned.
Because we don't get the good reports from the state on this test that we do on our MEP test. But we have good reports on the MEP from 8th grade, and certainly that is a good indication of things that were weak in and that were not so weak in for the high school. We are currently meeting with teachers and department leaders to analyze the results and disaggregate the data. We're doing that on a building level and a department level as needed. We're doing it especially with science, and we're doing it with language arts right now. We want to look at curriculum sequencing and see if we have some deficiencies. 4 years ago, when we did science, the test wasn't developed yet, and we did the best job we could of guessing what was going to be tested on this test and in what order. We think we probably need to go back now and look and see if we've got the right sequence in science. We maybe don't now that we've got the test to see what we have, and this is just kind of ongoing. So we're in the process of looking at that right now. We want to make sure our test-taking conditions are positive. We think we can improve a little bit on that, and it's certainly our intention to do that. Kids need to feel comfortable in taking the test. They need to feel confident. And in some cases, we think we can change timelines and change scheduling a little bit to make it a little more relaxed for them.
The problem, of course, with this is we have a very narrow window of time to give this test. And last, one of the things that we need to do is to do a good job of reviewing of skills prior to students taking the test, especially in science where kids have had some of the material 2 or 3 years ago. We need to review, and we need to build in review a little more frequently. And again, now that we've had a chance to see what kind of results we have and to see where our holes are, in many cases, we really know that kids were taught that and learned it at one time, but it's not fresh in their mind because they haven't had it for a number of years. And if we can build in some review, we will get that information up more at a conscious level for them, and give them some confidence. We did hear from some kids, some high school kids who are good students, who said, I had this in middle school, but I just don't remember it anymore. And they're on to higher level math and science, and some of the questions were more basic than where they are. And these were good kids, good students. And so, you know, again, we didn't have a chance to see the test until last spring, and so we know more information now. One of the things that helped us was a year ago, the high school piloted the writing program, the writing test. We were a pilot site. Our kids felt more comfortable taking the test. Our staff felt more comfortable administering the test because we had become somewhat familiar with the directions, and they were complicated, to say the least. The middle school this year is piloting the science MEEP 8th grade test. That will help us. Again, it's the MEEP test instead of the high school proficiency exam, but that will help us prepare kids for the proficiency exam. So whenever we have those opportunities, we're trying to take them because it will help make us better and ultimately make our kids better. That's it.
Yeah, let Jean get the projector away, and then I'm sure there'll be a host of them here. Kathy?
Is the state likely to change these tests, such as science, if we go through and align our curriculum and make sure we're sequenced correctly and all of that? What happens if we turn around and they change it?
Well, we will not be getting the same test again. Because of security issues, they will change. They have, I've heard a bank of, and we'll see, they have a bank of questions, and we will see about a fifth of those questions. So, our students, we've got to be careful that we don't prepare for a particular test, because that would be a danger of exactly what you said. The test is going to change, we know that. But the basic format shouldn't change, except to be approved, hopefully. And the percentages of questions, these 5 areas won't change for science. So,
So if we go to the
we're gonna be careful, but yes, we need to make sure that now that we see what kinds of questions they're giving, that our kids are exposed to that information.
Okay, another question I have is, will the time between getting the results and retaking it change and improve so that we really have time to do something for these kids before they retake the test? This was really a scramble, right? In 2 weeks.
We couldn't really do anything. We
Right.
couldn't prepare the kids.
Are we supposed to be able to? Will they clean that up so that we can?
No, I don't think, once we've gotten some good information about how kids do, we can begin to track kids better, I think, ourselves, and figure out who's not going to pass and what we can do to help
Before we
them.
get the results.
Well, even before we give them the test, probably. No, once we get a track record. It takes a long time for them to score because of the kinds of questions they have, and they're not gonna be able to speed that up much faster.
So what is your prognosis about this new testing that we just did? Do you really believe that many of those novice are gonna end up in the proficient column? Even
They're
though-
capable of doing it. We have another quirk this year. The students, this particular class of the 12th graders can get an endorsed diploma from their old MEP scores.
Right.
And so many students who took the proficiency exam last year had already acquired some ability to get endorsed diplomas. They weren't as motivated because of that, in some cases. And some of them, when they got their results and saw that they didn't pass, even if they were very close, and we had some very close, just thought it was a waste of time for them to take it.
Did they do it anyway? Did they have
They-
the option to not do it?
They took it. We didn't give them an option. As it turned out, we could have, but we ended up deciding not to. Parents can exempt their students, and we had some parents who actually did exempt their students from taking it. So, I know that a lot of kids who are novice can go up to proficient. I don't think we will see our best results with that this year because of the fact that they can already get their endorsed diploma.
But this
from
is
the
the
NEET.
final year,
This
correct?
is the final year for
They're
that.
not gonna change that.
No, because the rest of the kids haven't taken the MEET.
Bill?
I will say that this test route is nothing but 2 weeks of very intense debate at our house happening. One daughter that got a 399 on science was absolutely livid about the results. I think she got done quite articulate about that. And she was very hostile about taking the test. And I think she made some very good points about that. And one of the things that came across my desk just about the kind of test was in taking tests, one of the things that students rate the highest is that they have of a fair test is having knowledge of what's on the test. And I think the science test threw them because of some of the content areas that had been covered either back in 5th grade, like Scott just said, they were very basic and very obtuse, and it was earth science in particular. When you had IPS in 8th grade, biology in 9th grade, chemistry in 10th grade, and you're in AP chemistry in 11th grade, you haven't had any earth science. And some kids can guess well, and some kids who react to those kind of tests where it's very specific and they haven't had it, just don't do that well. And she actually missed the 10 questions in her science. Everything else was fine. So she got a 399. She was upset. She says, why should I take a test that's so important that I have to guess? And she's right. She shouldn't have to guess. And it surprises me in science that they couldn't find a common body of knowledge across all curriculums in biology, chemistry, and the scientific method, that they had to specialize, and because that raises some concern. Just to end on her note is, she was hostile going in. Most of the kids had gotten their ACT and SAT scores back. She got perfect score in ACT science. She's already got a verbal commitment to college. Why in the heck am I taking something that's not going to affect one whit of what's going to happen to me? You get that. I think the state has a problem among school districts where they have a high number of kids that know they don't make a difference. Sooner or later, it's going to go through them that this isn't really important, so why should I'll do what I have to do because I'm told to take the test. But the colleges aren't going to probably worry if they have a endorsed diploma, and they see very, very value in it, and it's going to present a psychological problem. My concern is that it's how much is it going to force us to take a curriculum that's highly successful, particularly at the high school level in the sciences at this school, and force it to turn around and jam something in to prepare students for January and December. And Gunnar has already told me that they're going to take a quarter out IPS to go back to earth science, which may help, but it really kind of messes up IPS now. It forces the whole year into 3 quarters to make sure, and I know that the faculty can probably do a job of smoothing that over. But that concerns me, of adjusting a very successful curriculum to respond to this. And the other thing I have as a concern is if it's really that important, then the MEET has to come in line with the type of test the proficiency test is. that sooner or later they have to have exposure in 5th and 8th grade to taking those kind of tests, to just come up and completely change the style of tests you've seen from the state. To me, is a conceptual, is a psychological problem. And I think they need to reorganize the MEP along the lines of proficiency, start giving those kind of questions. I think the high proficiency test is an excellent test. The way it's structured, the kind of questions, except for the very specific questions in science, is a great test. And it really serves the students well to know that they can do those kind of problems. And think that way and do reflective thinking as well as integrative thinking. The other standardized tests don't do that, and I think our students are well served. I think they have to solve the problem. I think the state should be challenged to think about that, how specific you are and how you're affecting curriculum on these tests. And I think we're gonna have a big problem when we get to social science one. I think we're gonna have kids flunk that social science thing for a couple of years, and we'll be scrambling to change the curriculum around to adjust to that one. That will probably be the hardest one. So, but I think if we have any input to the state at all, we need to talk to them about bringing the MEP in line with that kind of test, if that's the way it is. And we have to and I just think it's dangerous. Sequencing is one thing, but to start taking a very successful curriculum and start meshing pieces around to make it fit, we run into problems.
Let me respond just a second. We were looking at IPS before this. We were concerned that we had a lot of curriculum to cover and that perhaps we could do IPS in 3/4 of the year and add some other things. So this is another piece to that, but there are some people who believe that IPS could be restructured without losing the value that it has. Secondly, the new MEP, the science and the writing new MEPs, which are now given in 5th grade and 8th grade in the spring, are this same format. They have not changed the reading and the math, but those, when they are reviewed, will be. But the science, the new science and MEP and the writing MEP are very similar to what you see here. So the state is aware of that problem.
Couple questions. Now, the way I'm understanding this is that right now, we're looking at this. The staff is looking at our results to try to get an idea of exactly what happened. So we're speculating at this point as to what we think happened, right? And then will we hear later on what the various departments have come up with? Because I'm not sure that we shouldn't get too far off until we really have a better idea of exactly why our kids scored the way they did in certain areas. Or do you actually think that we have that information already?
Well,
I mean, we have ideas, but have we really reviewed?
we have done an item analysis. Again, we can't do it for the high school proficiency exam, but we have done an item analysis of our science in the new science in 5th grade and 8th grade. So we know exactly not only what items didn't kids get right, but what were the wrong scores that they got. And so we can look and say, was it the question? Did they not understand how the question was written? Do we not touch this? What was confusing about this? And we can correct that. We have that information now, and we're analyzing that so that we can help kids improve their scores if we can. Sometimes getting 1 or 2 answers correct makes a huge jump in your actual score. It's to our advantage to do that.
So at the
and to
high school
students.
level, we're going to know this at a later time?
At the high school, we'll never get the same detailed data because we don't keep the tests, and they don't give us how many kids scored, how many kids chose A, how many kids chose B, C, and D for multiple choice things. We don't get that kind of detailed information.
But do we find out how many kids didn't do well in which section?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
So we have that information
And
right now.
now, we didn't keep the test. Was there a way for us to determine if the questions being asked had anything to do with our curriculum? I don't know if I'm asking that correctly. What I'm trying to find out is what we have been teaching. Did we have a problem, for instance, in science, since that was one of the lower ones, with that not tracking with what we've been trying to teach?
That's
that
the
might
kind of
be the
information that we are really looking at now. And we don't have the high school proficiency exams to keep. But while they were here, while students were taking them, we could look at them and say,
I mean, and we've got our science people doing that.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are the most knowledgeable about how we teach it, and did our kids ever get it? Remember also, we're in the process of changing our science curriculum. At the elementary level, our kids are going to start looking better because we've got those units developed. We didn't have them developed. And so in some cases, our kids didn't have the information that was on the science
Well, I
test.
seem to remember when we got my son's ACT scores back, that they showed, in that letter, they showed how Hazlet did compared to the rest of the
Yes.
nation. And I thought we did quite well in science.
We do.
So I'm just wondering, do you know if the state is looking, because it's beginning to kind of appear that maybe they're testing things that aren't necessarily what is going to do our kids the best.
No question.
To know when they graduate from school. And really that's the aim of everyone, is to have us educate kids on what is going to help them the best in their lives after school. So,
There's no question.
I mean,
The
if the
science
colleges are looking
scores,
for something completely different than the state is,
the science scores statewide were low. So you have to ask, is it the test or is it the kids? You have to ask that, and I'm certain the state, or is it just the cut score? Was the cut score too high? Those are all things that are going to be sorted out. This is the first time through, and again, it's a very ambitious project, and there are going to be mistakes. It is a huge project.
Now, the other question I have is, in the high proficiency test, this includes the special ed kids too, correct?
Special ed students take it. Their grades can be pulled out if they get 50% or more of their reading or English instruction with a special educator. Otherwise, their scores are in with everybody else's. Their parents may exempt them so that they don't take it at all, but we are not allowed to do that. So yes.
If they get 50% of their reading instruction,
or English instruction with a 50% or more,
which
with
means
a
what, like
with a
co-taught
resource
classes or
teacher.
something?
Mhm.
But there wouldn't be any, there certainly wouldn't be, I wouldn't think, any advantage for a parent to pull their kid out of it unless they were absolutely positive they were going to fail, because if employers or colleges are at a later date looking at whether they pass the high proficiency test.
We had some parents request that their students not take it, special ed and not special ed. That's an individual decision, and
Yeah.
parents.
Scott?
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit concerned that I don't want to see any major reactions to a first-year test. The state has set up a test that, although, and I'm sure it is a good test, like Phil says, four of us on this board have sons or daughters that have took this test. And we have some, I hope some, although some of us communicate less with our children than others, I'm sure, at the dinner table, but nevertheless, the comments that I caught were, Dad, this test went all over the ballpark on me. I mean, I had some that were so ridiculously easy, it was, why am I wasting my time? And others, he hadn't seen any of the answers or any of the types of material at all, so he had no chance at it. I mean, so clearly to me, it's indicating that the test is, although maybe a good test, it needs some tuning up. And for us to jump in and react to it on a major scale on the first year would tend to lead me to believe that we are setting our curriculum strictly for a test, and I don't want us to do that. I believe that we ought to be taking over the longer haul, the ACT scores perhaps, and the old MEP scores, because those are tests that we're more familiar with, and take a little more conservative look at this one until we get a couple, 3, 4 years of history behind us to see how the test changes rather than how Hazlet changes. Granted that there may be some need of, in my view, of sequencing the different classes. I think that's a valid review anytime. This is as good a time as any because of these high proficiency tests. But no one has shown me yet that the high proficiency test endorsement is that big of a deal, one. I would rather have my kid score 30 on an ACT and be not qualified on this test right across the board. Now, chances that probably are pretty slim it would happen, but on any given bad day of testing, I guess it could. But in all honesty, if you had to weigh the two tests, which one, as a parent, would you rather see your kids score well on? It certainly would be the ACT for me. So that is way more of an indicator as to how this school system is educating them across the board than this political test that the state has now foisted upon all of us, and lo and behold, is now trying to judge all of our district's ability to educate. And the lovely media tends to jump on it right away and says, let's compare, Hazlet to Lansing, to DeWitt, to Okemos, to East Lansing, and all the rest. I mean, it's a great little device to do that, and it's just another device to do that. I'm just saying, in my looking at those numbers that you presented up there, those didn't scare me much. We were above the state average in everything. So let's not get crazy about this on the first year. We're doing okay. We can do better. But, I think we could have had that conversation before we ever took the test. We're doing okay, but we could probably do better. We knew
But we
that.
do have to deal with public perception. I know I've had quite a few parents ask me questions about should they have their child in IPS now, and, and would it be better for them to wait till 9th grade instead of 8th grade, and all of this geared from reading in the paper how we did on the test. So obviously there are people out there that are real concerned and don't know a lot about.
My biggest fear
background,
is the proficient compared to the novice. The suddenly, as you said, very good students who fall down in one area or two areas or whatever. I guess if you just fail in one, or not fail, but fall below the cut in one area, you're not proficient, right?
You're proficient in that only in that area.
You get your proficiency from that.
But the goal is clearly to be proficient in all four areas. You are now proficient, so you don't have to be retested, you don't have to do it. That's would be any parent's goal, would obviously for their child to go through and say, by the time you're in the 11th, 12th grade and it's 10th grade material, you should be proficient in all four areas, correct? Yeah, okay, makes sense to me. Well, my kid didn't do it. He scored 399, or she scored 3. Well, oh my God, I'm not, something's wrong here. Let's start, getting riled up and go to the principal and start asking them why the curriculum didn't, all of this kind of stuff. Let's not get crazy with the labels here on the first year of a test that we're not too sure of is the best test in the world, and clearly the state is new at it as well. I guess I'm more, let's calm down. Let's look at it. Let's look at it as another test, and unfortunately another political test in my view. But I don't see anything that the proficiency test does to a diploma that will increase or decrease any child's ability to get a job or go to college. Because I don't think the employers know what it's about, and I certainly don't think the colleges care, because there isn't any one that has asked my kid whether or not they're going to be proficient or not. They want to know the ACT scores on every one of them. They want to see their transcripts on every one of them, but they don't want to see the other stuff. So I just calm down, I guess, take it a little quieter, take it a little slower, and tell the department heads to take a good look at it and adjust accordingly. But I'd be interested in the sequencing, because I think the algebra, in my view, it's the math sequencing, not the science as much. The math sequencing is somewhat of a problem for me as far as the algebra. I don't know why we skip years between algebra. They did that in the 60s when I was there, and I still don't understand it. Why did I have to skip that year and throw geometry in the middle so that I could try and remember advanced placement algebra
Well, you don't
2?
have to do that. That's not a requirement.
Well, but that's the track. That's the
I know.
recommendation. So I've never understood that. For the life of me, I've never understood, and I still don't understand. But thanks for, that's all I have to say.
Jeff?
I like a lot of stuff this guy, and I agree with some of it too. I've got some basic questions. Well, I think on the sequencing, that's on the science side, that's always kind of bothered me, so we do it alphabetically rather than tying it to the math and some of the things. That's the side. Just a couple of clarification things. You said on the meet that there's some people still grandfathering. Who does that affect and when does it end?
The current seniors.
Oh, so they'll be the only ones.
That's right.
So they take both, or
They did take
They have an
both. They took, that was the group that took the MEP as as sophomores, because it was still there, they had to take it, but they were told it wouldn't count for anything. Well, then after they had taken it, then they were told that
if they passed it, that would be their endorsement. So they are that transition year. It's just this one, just the seniors
But
this year.
science isn't involved in.
But science was not involved, and if they get a reading endorsement, there's no writing endorsement with the MEP. So
Right.
the endorsements are different. So some students will have 3 MEP endorsements and 3 high school proficiency exam endorsements who are seniors this year.
Well, have dual endorsement,
They'll have a lot.
twice as good.
Lick all those stickers.
On the 12 hours, obviously they don't take it 12 hours straight. And you mentioned that, how much latitude do we have in terms of the testing conditions for them? That's 12 hours per section or 12 hours?
No, it's 12 total, 12
Oh.
total hours.
You do it 3 hours
Total.
at a time, right?
2 hours. I think it's a 2-hour block, I think. It's over 3 or 4 days, then you have to have the makeups, and you have to complete everything in that 2-week period. So we try to get as much done on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of that first week. We try not to test on Monday and Friday if we can.
Well, they have to do the makeups too, oh, you mean if they missed a section, then they have an opportunity to
Right.
do the makeup?
We only have the tests for a short window of time. And the state does give us a suggested schedule of how much each day that you should test.
The conditions, and you mentioned that some things we may be able to do to help the conditions, but one of the variables, it seems, is some guidelines or coaching on how to take a test like this. And several people have mentioned that just the structure of the test seems to be something of a surprise to some. Is that something we can help them with, or we would help them with, or we're not allowed to help them with?
Well, now that we know what the structure is, we can. We had basic ideas of the structure, and of course, we had an idea of what the writing structure was going to be like because we had piloted that. But until you've lived through it once,
Right.
we didn't have a good feel for it. Our staff is much more familiar now with it, and they can give kids some information about the structure, which is perfectly legal.
Sure. I just, and I guess my last question, on the scores, that, like the scores that are in the paper, they only, they represent everybody who takes the test. I mean, you said it was the district-wide?
The scores that were in the paper were Meridian and the high school combined together.
Okay.
And almost everybody, we might have a few special ed students whose scores were exempt.
Now, so this was the first time there was no, I mean, it's, you could take this as a junior and as a senior?
Right.
So all of them take it together?
Well,
Or the
we took it
scores
as, you took it as a, in the spring, only juniors took it.
Okay.
This fall, only seniors took it who had not passed it as a junior.
Okay,
Well,
so
it's
they're
quite
not, their
true, but
scores aren't all averaged together?
it's close.
So in the
Pardon me?
spring, can juniors and seniors take it together?
They could.
So they would be,
Only the seniors that have
The
yet to.
seniors,
Didn't
that's
pass.
right. The
Pass.
makeup seniors
Okay.
and the juniors. And
okay.
I don't know how Gunnar and Maria will structure that,
And
whether
you
they'll
have to
have
wonder,
kids
that's
together.
the
Well, that's
Your
what, that's
scores,
my
yeah,
point,
that's
is
where you're going.
that as we go through additional testing periods, the scores are going to be affected by the number of kids who are taking it again?
No, the scores that we get will be not the makeup scores. The scores that will be produced in the paper will be the first-time testers.
Ah,
Oh, really? Okay. And so they do have ways of segregating this out?
Oh, yes. Every student has a student number and a code and their own special book.
So if you take it as a junior and you don't score well, your score is not included, or? You've taken it as a first time, so if you took it as a first time and you're not proficient, and then you take it again the next time, that whole set of people who are taking it as a second time is considered as a separate category?
Their scores, we get the reports back from them differently than we get the reports from.
Okay.
We get first-time scores, which would be your junior class.
Okay.
And then I assume they'll do it like they did the MEP. You know, we haven't had that yet. Then then we will get the repeater tests scores, separate, they're not together.
Okay, so the media will have that, and it's up to them to, how well they
They
portray
usually
it.
are only interested in the first-time scores.
Okay.
So far, because that's all we've got.
Well,
Right,
that's
well,
the way it
that's-
was with me,
yeah.
with me.
Can I just to throw a curve in here, can you explain, how the 10th graders now will take the test? Because if you can take it in 10th grade, and the question I have is, the reason why a 10th grader would take the test is so that they could then get enroll in high school. Do they have to pass to get proficient in all 3 areas to take a class? I mean, you couldn't get math science and then go take math science courses at a college or university. I mean, how does that work? How is that, what's the rules gonna be on that?
Well,
Or is it all
what are
3?
they or what are they going to be? I don't know.
I'm shaking
I mean,
his
they
head,
could
I
be
don't know.
changed. Right now, they have to pass all unless it's something that we don't teach. Isn't that the way it is?
Or they could take it, and if they passed it in one of the areas, they could class in those areas they're supposed to.
Right.
Okay, so they can take math science.
What Phil is talking about is there are 2 conflicting laws, and this is the correction for it. You can't take a class in like an LCC class in this area that we would pay for if you haven't passed your high school proficiency test. But some students, you need to be endorsed. But some students want to take those classes at an LCC, for instance, as a junior. Well, they wouldn't have taken the proficiency exam soon enough. So if the parents request, they may take the proficiency exam as a sophomore if they are planning to go to a college that we would pay for, be duly enrolled in their junior or senior year.
Well, even if you took it as a junior, it's going to take them 6 months to score it. I mean,
That's right.
how is that going to help you? I mean, what do you take that in
Still can't
March,
sign up
April?
for a college class
Right.
in the fall
Right. You wouldn't be able to
because.
say
Well,
it's
we're
Next year's
just,
junior,
again,
senior year.
all of these things, trying to sort it all out, and it will all sort out.
Now, that means that's a law. Does that mean LCC will turn kids down that want to pay their money and take it before
No,
they've
it's
taken
if
their
we
high
pay for it.
proficiency?
It's in order for us to pay for
Okay,
it.
so we won't pay for it unless.
Right.
Anything else?
Yes.
I can't see them turn.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very good report, filled in a lot of information. Obviously, we had a great deal of questions still. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jan.
And I hope our media person doesn't take anything we said about the media personally.
Board reports, finance facilities. Kathy?
Okay, we covered several items tonight. We met at 6:30 and we talked about our budget amendment that is due sometime soon, but it's going to be delayed somewhat. Hopefully sometime in November we'll be able to deal with that, but because of our bond sale preparation, it's going to be a little bit late this time. So if anybody has a problem with that, I guess you should call Bob or Dave. Bond sale schedule, Bob reported that everything is on target, and our bond sale is scheduled for this Thursday on October 17th, and the market forecast looks really good, so hopefully we'll get some good news at our meeting on Monday when we meet to talk about that. We also talked about purchase of natural gas, which Bob and Mike Joseph, I believe Mike was the one that brought it to Bob's attention. They would like us to consider purchasing our natural gas directly from the commodity market instead of through Consumers Power. And we talked about it a little bit in detail, but there is a gentleman from a company called EMC Gas Transmission Company who would come and talk to the full board and answer any questions that we have about what this process includes and all of that. So we'll put that on, I guess, real soon on as an agenda item. Okay. And request to add assistant coaches. Jamie Gent has requested, as we all saw in our packet, that we add an assistant coach for girls swimming and also girls gymnastics. Bob recommended that as an approval, and we do recommend that from our committee. The committee's also suggesting that we go ahead with an assistant tennis coach for the boys yet this year, which would be in the spring. So, but we would wait obviously for the girls' tennis because girls' tennis is over with for the year.
Have they hired somebody, or how are they gonna do swimming? Swimming's only got 2 meets left.
Well, this is for girls' swimming.
That's right, girls swimming
That's
has
what
2
they're doing now.
meets this week. And then districts and stuff, is that gonna be retroactive?
In swimming, it would be retroactive, yes, because what has been happening is our coach has basically been taking his salary and prorating that with other coaches, so in the sense of fairness, there will be less of that if we approve this extra position.
So there is an assistant coach basically now, right?
Yes.
As there has been.
One
Okay.
volunteer.
But now we're gonna pay for them. Still.
Well, rather than coming out of the coach's pocket,
Right.
it's gonna come from the board, which certainly is more appropriate. The numbers of kids that we now have in girls swimming lends itself for this assignment, as is in the case in gymnastics and boys tennis. I think it's a sign of that enrollment increasing, and that's a good problem to have, is that more kids are participating in these programs. We're particularly concerned about gymnastics and the safety issues surrounding gymnastics this winter.
Okay, and then the last item we discussed was school bus purchase, and that is to purchase 2 more school buses. And that is on our agenda as an action item, and it's paid for in next year's budget, not this year's, just like our last year's purchase was covered in this year's budget. So that was it.
And you recommend on the school board, the school bus purchases?
Mhm.
You
Yes,
do
we do.
recommend in favor of that?
Yes, we do.
Okay. All righty. Is there any question on the school bus, I guess, purchases now from anybody else? Should we go ahead with that one now rather than pulling it? Any
That's not on the
concerns?
bond issue, right? We just clear up the buses on the bond issue. What,
Is it on the bond or not on? It's not on the bond?
No, it is not on the bond.
not
So
on-
basically, the buses that we purchased this year were paid out of this year's budget. They're not financed, but they're paid, I guess you could say with cash out of this year's budget, and we're recommending that same process next year. I believe for the sake of the community, it's important for them to understand that the buses that we will be replacing are buses that have in excess of 100,000 miles, in some case 135,000 miles, and they're buses that basically are 14 years old, so we've certainly got our money's worth. We need to keep that constant rotation of new buses coming to the district. And that's compounded with the fact that we're going to have more students to transport next year than we do this year.
And this comes out of 97, 98 budget.
Yes.
Okay. Policy and personnel, staff?
we have none, now.
Item 3 is down as the president's suggestion, and that's really, Bob and I talked about this, and he put it down as my suggestion because I wanted to take it a little bit farther, but this originally came from Charlie on an email, and it was a suggestion that the board has made a commitment, and I think it's been, 3 years now that we've been working on board visibility. I'm looking at Scott because I think was
Third year,
Scott's
we're in
original
our
suggestion.
third year, I think, yes.
And the board is taking it, the visibility committee this year is taking it a step further, and I'm embarrassed to say that my name isn't on the list of visibility checkoff list. There are 4 people whose names are on here, 3 are who are not, and we know who we are. And of the items of visibility that people have committed themselves to during the coming year. And what Charlie's suggestion to me was, is that when people do visit a middle school for lunch or attend a PTO meeting or ride a bus, that they have the opportunity at a board meeting to tell about it and to make the visibility visible, so to speak. And I think that's an excellent idea, and I think it would be a good thing to do at virtually every board meeting. The only thing I wanted to suggest is that if there are other things that board members wish to tell about that aren't necessarily visibility items, that they indeed have the opportunity to do that sort of at the same time as a roundtable type of thing. Now, I'm not sure that Charlie and I communicated completely on this, and I give them the opportunity to, but this is what I'm suggesting we do, is just have an additional item right down, probably with the board reports that would add to that.
Well, first of all, I was just sort of a communicator, because it was really the visibility committee that was recommending that we have an item on the agenda once a month we said once a month.
Oh, okay.
And just to give board members an opportunity to talk about the items that, they may have done in the previous month in relationship to our visibility goals. I guess in respect to the additional items that we may want to talk about, my only suggestion would be that we be very careful that we don't get into full-blown discussions about stuff and drag it out and out and out, because I have seen board meetings at other places where those things tend to really get bogged down, and then we will lose what the original intent was. And it's just to, communicate some of our activities and things that we've been doing.
Does everybody concur, agree, disagree?
I just have to say that I am on the visibility committee, and I guess my understanding was that as people had things to report, we would ask to have it put on the agenda. I don't know where this would fall on the agenda, but I don't think it should fall at the beginning. If we do indeed do it this way, where we put it on every month. And I agree wholeheartedly that we have to really stick to the purpose of the whole thing. But I guess my feeling is that I'd rather have people, if they have something to say, to ask you or Bob to put it on the agenda specifically.
We can do that.
And maybe that, I guess I misunderstood. I didn't see it as a regular monthly thing as much as I was kind of hoping we would just do it when we really have something specific to say. I'm just afraid we're gonna get bogged down.
I'm getting confused. As to what our intent is.
Well, some meetings, there's gonna be several people reporting on things, and there's gonna be meetings when maybe nobody did, so
Some are more.
it does make more
It
sense
was just an
to-
opportunity
yeah.
on the agenda on a regular basis, so that we don't forget that we have committed to do some things and that we really should report on. That was the reason for putting it on the agenda, just as a reminder to us that if we've done something, here's your opportunity. Whether you've done anything or not, if you haven't done anything, well, then you haven't done anything. And
Nobody's keeping
we just-
score.
Well, I knew
nobody's
that you
keeping
had
score.
something you wanted to talk about tonight, and that, so you,
Well, no,
right,
when
did
it's
you?
time is appropriate, I'll talk about it.
Oh, okay.
Would this, an example of this be, and help me out, say I want to sign the intent here. Would an example of this
I'm really
be,
proud of my feelings.
I went to the parade and I didn't like it because of the political nature? Is this
I
what
would
you're saying?
hope- I would hope
This is
not.
what you're trying to avoid, or is this what you're trying to bring out? I guess because I'm visible, I went to the parade, but I didn't like it because I saw too much political activity,
No, I
like
think
the
it
letter
was-
to us indicated. That's not what your intent is here, is it?
No, I think the intent here is that, for example, let's take one of the examples that's written down here, attend an elementary open house. Fine, you attended the open house, a brief statement on the fact that you went there and that you probably enjoyed it, and that, maybe a quick statement of what went on, et cetera, and leave it at that. I think there is one caution here that's extremely important, and that's that these reports should be like a minute long. I mean, we certainly don't want to get into somebody doing a 15-minute dissertation about the open house at one of the elementary schools. I think that goes way beyond what we're talking about. It's just simply an opportunity to say, hey, there was an open house at the elementary school, I went there, I enjoyed it, the particular thing I enjoyed the most was, and then go on. So that we can sort of report out. And I think it's important to say, it makes us do what we've committed to doing, because pretty quickly it's gonna become obvious that some of us aren't reporting, so, I think it will force an issue. And I think that's
we're
good.
keeping score.
Although
Yeah, you may not be, but we all know.
I do think that if Scott went to the homecoming parade and didn't have a kid in the parade, that should count as one of his visibility items.
That was probably
It's
unlikely.
a pretty good bet that I'm not gonna have any kids in the parade anymore.
So, leave it that it would be a monthly item. Should we have it regularly scheduled or as needed?
I think as needed, I agree with
I
Kathy.
think as needed myself, but
Okay, we'll make it as needed.
Why limit it to monthly if you got somebody that's, just done something, they might as well say it.
You can just
Right
tell
after the
this
fact.
one the night.
Okay.
the meeting.
Sounds to me like an items from the audience. I mean, this is items from the board.
Right.
Why don't we just do
And
that
just
then?
roll it by and ain't none. Keep right on rolling.
That's fine too.
Well, in fact, in some boards, and the recommended board protocol from MASB is that be an action item, or an item on your board agenda is items from the board. It also gives you the opportunity to comment on other things maybe that aren't necessarily visibility, but the ISOA or other kinds of committees that we may be involved with that don't show up as regular agenda items, but as the general category of board activities, or board member activities.
I think what we'll do is I think we'll do the items from the board for a time, see how that works out, and please, people, short. Meetings can be long enough as it is.
Okay, I'm gonna give you an example that, like.
Get it.
Okay, last Wednesday, I went to the middle school PTO meeting, Common Council, and Gail Hicks, Jennifer Dubes, Nancy Inman, and Sue Allen gave an excellent presentation on the math program. And the parents that were there certainly appreciated it.
Very well done.
That's all?
Thank you.
That was 15 seconds at the most. It was a good program.
Thank you, Charlie.
All right, Charlie's up 1-0.
Action items,
Scott
we
hasn't
have,
started yet.
we have 5 items tonight. There are no additions, are there? Okay.
We have to take one out.
Yeah, we
Pull
take
one.
out.
Pull one. Pull any of the others? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion for items 2, 3, and 4. The first one is the purchase of,
And 5.
I'm sorry, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It is the purchase of 2 buses, isn't that? Yes, purchase of 2 buses to replace number 9 and number 11. The second one is the acceptance of the 1996-97 district goals. The third is the sale of a school bus that has 110,000 miles on it. Again, trust we've gotten our money's worth on these buses. And then tuition acceptance request for Chad Nguyen as a tuition student in 1996-97 from Okemos. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, item number 1.
You know, I have to tell you, I'm losing my memory, but when I read that I made the motion to make me the secretary, I thought, no, I haven't lost my memory that bad. So it was Charlie,
The
right?
motion was made for me to be secretary.
Okay, all right, so that needs to be changed in the minutes, that, I guess I made the motion, but it was Charlie.
And
who
I
was
signed the
secretary.
agreement,
And
too.
Charlie signed it, right.
It's a good thing that you're changing this then.
Yeah, because that was an important thing that we changed it for, so.
Okay, with that change, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Announcements of future meetings. We have 2 meetings coming up in the future. It's becoming a regular Monday event. On October the 14th, we will be meeting at
We just did it.
7:30. I thought it was 7, oh, that's,
14th, we just did
14th is tonight.
excuse me. Wrong page, 21st. Try it again. 21st, I thought that was wrong. On the 21st, we will be meeting here at 7 o'clock to discuss the bond sales resolution. That should be, I assume, a short meeting and will probably not be on television. The next regularly scheduled board meeting is October the 28th at